So hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Aceves. I am in product management at Tanium.
My name is Melissa Bischoping, Director of Endpoint Security Research at Tanium.
And I am Tim Gallo, one of the Mandiant principal architects.
Perfect. So we know we're like the last session of the day. We're going to hopefully make this super exciting. The goal for today, we're going to show you the power and the art of the possible as Tanium and Mandiant start to partner together. And so some of you all might already work with Mandiant with the Mandiant Advantage Intel platform, and Tim's going to talk a little bit about that. A lot of you all, and some of you as well, might be working with Tanium as well. So we have a partnership that we're working on where you're going to be able to leverage MADI Intel directly within the Tanium console. So you can send this Intel to your endpoints for evaluation and get the context that's really important to your organizations. So before we get in, if I've ever met with any of you all in the past, please interrupt me. I can talk your ear off. I know that Melissa and I, when we get running, we present together, or I guess this is our first one, but we can get talking. So if you have questions, I invite you to interrupt, ask those questions. Let's make the last session of the day a little bit more fun. This is us. This is the old deck. So we had to put likes, and I put a like, and nobody else did. But if you've not had rambutan, it's like a really good fruit. All right.
So we're going to start off just with the concept of how threat intelligence is used as part of this program, and why I think personally the partnership with Tanium is pretty fantastic. We're going to go deep into how how Tanium with Mandiant threat intelligence is going to ultimately be able to help drive your IR practices. But let's dig into a little bit on why threat intelligence and why you got to spend your budget on it in the first place. I mean, key questions that come out are, what are the threats? How do I detect them? How do I effectively use intelligence? And ultimately, how do these threats affect me? Mandiant threat intelligence is all about, helping you answer these questions. But the partnership with Tanium here is really going to drive us to answer those latter questions. How is this threat going to affect me? How do I effectively use this intelligence? Putting it into the tools that your responders are using every day in order to defend the environment. We know that Mandiant Intelligence is among some of the best in the world, and it's the basis for literally everything we do here at Mandiant. Our cycles are all full closed loop, and this partnership is going to allow us to look further into the actual responders, their capabilities, and continue to close the loop and close the gap on how intelligence can be operationalized most efficiently. So if you want more information about our collections, our processes, MADI in general, you can come talk to me, talk to any of the Mandiant folks. We live, love, and breathe this stuff day in, day out. But that's it for me. I want to let Stephanie and Melissa really kind of dig into how Tanium is using it, what the integrations are looking like, and what this development is driving towards. I mean, we'll all pop in and play off each other as the process goes, but that's really it for me.
So I'm curious to see what parts of the business is everyone in? I know we have folks that are SOC, we have folks that are Intel. What do y'all care about?
That'll help drive
Intel. Anyone not Intel?
Oh, I do integrations.
Integrations?
Very cool.
Okay. Cool. All right. So let's jump into it. So how many of you now, just show of hands, have seen Tanium, whether you use it or not? Seen it? Okay. Probably seen one of the different components of it. It does a lot. It can be overwhelming when people ask us, what does Tanium do? It's like a really hard conversation. Well, it's like, what do you want it to do? So we're going to kind of narrow our focus into Tanium Threat Response, which is the core capability within Tanium to be able to take intel and to evaluate against your endpoints. Now, Threat Response is Tanium's security solution. We run alongside your EDR solutions to really help anything that gets past EDR, or to help things that like 0 days, insider threats, supply chain attacks, to really give you the visibility and the agility to respond that you need. That being said, there are a number of different capabilities that Threat Response provides to users. Up here we have kind of a list of them. You want to kind of kick off and talk through some of these? We don't have to.
Yeah, and if you want to go into a deep dive on some of the threat response capabilities, we're happy to sort of demo some of these individually and talk through how they're used. But at the high-level overview, Tanium Threat Response is made up of several solutions, and Tanium as a whole really can leverage some of these same technologies throughout multiple modules, because if any of you are in incident response or have worked in incidents, you know that you don't want to be siloed into a specific workflow. You need to be able to use the tools that work, and you need to be able to enrich your data through that process. So we have sensors, which allow you to go out and collect information. And these can be out of the box, or these can be ones that you define and you can write. If you can script it, we can deploy it as a sensor. And we also have the recorder, which is grabbing just all of the activity on the endpoint. Now that's kept on the endpoint and able for you to pull from, but you can also send this out. We have an integration with Google Chronicle, or you can send it out to other destinations. So you've got a much longer historical context, because again, if you've worked in incidents, this is something that you have to be able to do some look back to be able to really timeline. We also have alerting. We have our proprietary signals. You can also leverage some other capabilities. And then in addition to the investigation part of the workflow, you want to be able to do some response actions, and that can be collecting more forensic data, or that can go further into actually quarantining or enforcing policy on your endpoint.
So really quick, just a question here, thinking about this, right? One of the things that we oftentimes get caught up on from the Intel side of things is indicators, observables, and that kind of fits into some of the real-time alerting that you're talking about. But when we look at some of the more in-depth components, process recorder, file catalog analysis, can you describe how you would use Intel as part of that process?
Yes. So I love to talk about Intel as, when you get a valuable piece of intel, be it through the service, through maybe that's something that's been put out through like a CISA or an FBI alert, or something that your current internal Intel team has developed for you, what do you do with it? Where do you put it? And sometimes this is intel that is not going to set off your EDR tooling. It's not going to trip your AV. It's not necessarily going to show up on a compliance scan. You have to be able to break that intelligence apart, and it almost becomes a hunting exercise, or it becomes okay, let's scope this incident of what's most likely to happen next and be able to tailor our workflows and reduce that time to stopping the attacker in your environment. So when you're getting intel, being able to have a dynamic and extensible framework to break that intel apart and actually put it in the context of your real environment, that's the difference between just consuming an intel feed and operationalizing intel.
Well, and that's exactly why why something like this partnership is putting Intel into tools that allow you to operationalize it. So instead of just consuming it, instead of just taking an indicator hit or an observable or whatever, you're actually able to use it in your workflow.
Right. Cool. And something about Intel specifically, and part of what I love about it is that my job is never the same on any 2 given days. That also means, though, that the same tool, the same workflow, the same sensor that I've written may not be the right one. I need to be able to get very granular and very precise so that I can really dial in my investigation and be able to take that action faster.
Yeah. So a list of capability is a grab bag of things that you can do, right? But what does it ultimately provide you if you are working with Tanium and Mandiant Intel? So Tanium at its core is a communications platform. We've built on top of that to basically talk to your machines really, really, really fast. Talking to them bidirectionally, meaning I can tell the machine to do something, but I can also just collect information from that machine. Now, what this looks like in a security incident view is we have 3 sources of evidence built on top of this platform to give you visibility. And this intel gets evaluated against those 3 sources of evidence. The first source of evidence, I'm going to jump to the next one, is its current state. Current state is every process that is running right now, every network connection that is currently open and active. Now, my background, these folks know, my background is red teaming. I started off my career at EY doing red team engagements. And I remember the first demo that I saw of Tanium. I was actually here on an engagement in DC. And the account manager at the time showed me a demo and showed me that he just ran a quick question that said, give me the name and the hash of every single running process right now. He was able to pull that back in less than 5 seconds. And I am not lying. If you've ever seen a Tanium demo, it kind of looks like spooky magic. It looks like somebody's lying. We're not lying. It actually works. And that's because of the way the platform works. So when you start thinking about the implications that this has for a security incident, being able to have that real-time visibility into everything that is executing right now, every network connection that is open right now, the current state of every registry key that you could possibly care about that maybe is part of your investigation. Now, that real time is super critical in an incident, right? But nobody's having their entire team sitting there manually asking these questions. And so you can leverage the MADI intel to more passively in the background start to evaluate and look for the things that you care about. Now, the second source of evidence is going to be the data at rest. Tanium comes with a component that we call Tanium Index, and this is a distributed index database of every file on disk. What this allows you to do is to search via magic number, via hash, via metadata, and to really focus in on the files at rest that you care about. Kind of jointly part of that, there's a capability to look within those files to search for specific patterns, to search for sensitive words, sensitive keywords, PII, PCI, that really help kind of scope things out. That last component is that historical data piece that Melissa talked about. And so being able to look back at every single process that has ever executed, every DNS query that was made, every registry key that was changed, every file event, you name it. Being able to look back and say, okay, well, I see one machine that's affected. Maybe I have a crypto mining, I found evidence of crypto mining software, and that tipped off that we have attackers in the environment, right? Maybe not related to the crypto mining software, but we noticed weird beaconing traffic. Now, it comes down to the matter of, I have one machine that's affected. I need to dig deeper into that system to generate more intel, to basically start to scope out what other machines in my environment have been affected by this. And so when you need to take that kind of bird's eye view, take a step back and really understand, of all my estate in the last 30, 60, 90 days, these machines have hit that IP that I've now identified as a C2. These machines have tried to query for that malicious domain. Maybe they've executed the same binary, or maybe they've changed registry keys, or maybe we have affected accounts that we knew were affected at a certain point in time, and we have login events that are atypical on machines after that initial exploitation. So being able to paint that picture, tell the whole story, I like to say that we give you the confidence you need to know that you're taking the right next step, right? You don't want to make a decision to quarantine a machine and figure out that you got one of the 30 machines the attacker was on, and all of a sudden data exfil happens and you are on the hook with the board trying to explain why all these things are happening to the business.
So I want to pivot off that really quickly. A lot of the work that I focus on at Tanium is looking at 0 days and looking at some of the most significant emerging threats that are the hardest for a customer to remediate. These are the things that there's no maybe available patch, or it's not just as simple as pop a registry setting and you're good to go. The same thing applies to looking at threat actors and being able to consume intelligence and look at that of, this isn't going to necessarily show up of, okay, you've got this one application or you've got this one process running, but that alone isn't enough to tell you that you're vulnerable to something. So being able to consume intelligence about a holistic campaign or about, the profile of a threat actor or the profile of what one of these intel documents would look like, and put that in the context of your environment to say, I have a high fidelity indicator based on not just this one process that's executing, but also what box it's on, what else is running, when it happened, and in what order.
I think that really kind of comes back to the story of intelligence from an external vendor is important because it's bringing out the outside view, but that only is part of how you have to respond and how you have to think about it internally. You've got to be able to, and I like to say this, you've got to be able to take your own autobiography and apply that to the intelligence that's being driven to you. How does that make you? How does that piece of intelligence drive the behavior of your responders because of the technologies that you're using, of the services that you're running intentionally and unintentionally, and ultimately of your industry, your demographic, your own organizational story, because that is going to change how the adversary runs their campaign against you. And knowing what they're doing today is going to be different than what that timeline would have been had you found this process 3 weeks ago.
I think one of the hardest questions that I get when I'm talking to practitioners in the field is, it's very hard to say, is this malicious in my environment or not, without contextual awareness of everything else that's going on. What is malicious to one may be completely normal to another based on how you're configured. And so being able to couple that with looking across the enterprise, as we talked, at that speed, gives you contextual awareness plus threat intelligence and allows you to make real-time choices.
Yeah. And that ability to make those real-time choices, like I said, it's empowering, right? You want to know that when you take action, that it is the right action. You want to be able to sleep at night knowing that if you have to respond to an incident, you've scoped it well enough that response activity is not going to cause any repercussions. And so having that real-time visibility, and then the power of being able to just really quickly say, I need to quarantine all the machines that are running this process, or I want to create a remediation policy to then go ahead, be able to say, first thing I need to do is kill this process, then I need to uninstall a service, I need to delete registry keys that maybe were used for persistence, then I need to upgrade software, deploy patches, right? Remediation often extends beyond security. And this is kind of that power of that Tanium platform. And this is really at the core of the Tanium story is how do we make you better and how do we make you more secure? And how do we give you that kind of stopgap that when something gets past your security toolings, right? We're not like 0 days are not new anymore, which kind of sucks, but it's kind of, like the state of the union.
It's job
You
security.
have to, yeah, like you have to expect that something is going to be novel. It's going to be, it's going to get past other security solutions. And how do you respond? And how confident are you that you can respond? And that ultimately comes down to, I know that in an instant, I can see across my entire state, the current state, and I know that in that same instant, I can take action. And if that action means I need to quarantine these machines, or if I have to kill this process, or create some type of 80 group policy, whatever it is, I have that power at my fingertips. Anything that you can do on a single system, you can do across the estate. And so that brings us to more of that investigation piece. How do you figure out what you have to do? This is where, how many folks have like backgrounds in IR or in like the forensics wheelhouse? Cool. So you know that there's a lot of native artifacts on disk that you're going to want to pull. And sometimes it is important to go look into memory, to do a full memory analysis to figure out what is it exactly that the attacker is doing, right? And so Tanium is also going to enable you to pull those native artifacts so you can dive deeper to then be able to figure out what that appropriate response is.
So this is one of my favorite topics here is where we get outside of the modules because, so Tanium does have a lot of different modules that empower you with a lot of different capabilities, but more importantly than that, we talk a lot more about workflows because, again, anytime that I'm in the face of an incident or in the face of a 0 day, I'm looking at this of what tool do I have in front of me right now that's going to get me to my resolution the fastest. I hate the phrase single pane of glass, but that's how at the end of the day, this is an opportunity for you to have all of your data in that source of truth where the data that's coming off of the asset, the data that's coming out of threat response, the data that's coming out of your compliance scans, and all of the other tooling that we offer is coming from the same source, and then you're able to apply policy or deploy those patches and send those out based on the same information. So you're not having to pivot out of one tool into another. Okay, well that report was generated 12 hours ago. This one's still running. I gotta wait for it to finish. Your speed to resolution increases, it reduces astronomically. I also think that it's important to talk about these things in a, you don't know what's going to come next. In the past year that I've been really diving in from the research side of the house, I don't ever encounter the same 0 day twice. The fix is never the same, and we're seeing that more, especially as we look into more supply chain vulnerabilities, and Log4j makes my eye twitch. But as we see these really challenging things that are hard to go out and search for, giving you the dynamic capability and the ability to pivot between different workflows and use the right part of the tool for the job, I think that's where we shine.
Yeah, and like bringing Maddie into this, right? Maddie is giving you the context you need to make these decisions. So the integration that we're launching with Tanium and Mandiant Advantage is to be able to ingest the IOCs directly from Maddie. So if you have a Maddie subscription, you get those directly within Tanium. You're able to then evaluate against those IOCs to scan, find out where there's bad in your environment. And once you get that bad, you get the full context that Tanium provides. So we have impact data that shows you potential for lateral movement. How many folks are familiar with Bloodhound? Tanium's version of Bloodhound, so you can see shortest path to DA, shortest path to DCs. But getting that context, getting information about the asset, so knowing how many critical vulns are on it, knowing maybe the last time it was patched, even knowing what software is installed, like knowing if there are any dependencies that have to be met. But getting that full endpoint view, what is everything I know about this machine? And then getting the full report and the actor view within Maddie, being able to say, okay, well, I now know this is a critical asset. Maybe it's an executive's machine, or maybe it's an internet-facing production server. So I know this is one of my highly tiered, like high-risk assets. What does this IOC tell me? And this is where Maddie comes in and gives you that context.
Yeah, I mean, being able to take those observables in context of the machine, pivoting back into the Advantage platform itself and say, okay, this is the indicator. This indicator is associated with this campaign by this adversary and this malware. Well, when you found it, where on what system was it found? It was found on an executive's laptop.
Yeah.
Well, that means that it's more likely associated with this specific portion of the campaign, which would drive the type of behavior that they're going to go to next. which then leads you down the path and the workflow that you're supposed to be following because of that specific intent. Now, if it's, contextualize it to a different system, that means you've got to go to a different workflow. But you're able to see what the events look like and where the adversary is going to pivot based upon the context, the campaign, and the intelligence that we're providing back to you.
Yeah.
Making it easier for you to figure out which workflow paths you're going to follow.
And let me, let me drop into my, hey, I'm consuming intelligence from Maddie, and I'm trying to prepare, what do our customers need? What's the best workflow? What's the fastest thing they're going to do? So I'm going to take that piece of intelligence, and maybe nothing's signaled on it in my environment. Maybe it hasn't executed yet, but this is severe enough that I need to go hunt for it. I'm going to start looking at, okay, what is the profile of the machines, or maybe it's a software, maybe it's an open port, maybe it's a combination of these things that these threat actors are exploiting. So I'm going to go look for that. All right, when I find it, now I'm going to go look for my IOCs, or I'm going to go look for other signs of behavior that are known bad, or I'm going to look for, does this deviate? Does this one machine potentially deviate that it's got a registry key or maybe a different process hash running than the others with that same piece of software running?
And that change is pretty significant because that could mean anything from developed new tooling specifically for this target, or it could mean that they got popped in an IR somewhere else, and so now we're seeing them change their TTP because of some other incident. But we're going to see them changing their behavior historically over time, being able to use that not only in the incident itself, but feed that information back to your intelligence providers as well, allows them to see how things are going to change in real time and to change the profiles on the adversaries. It becomes mutually beneficial.
And so once I've got that confidence that I'm like, I am dealing with something significant here, let me know where in that attack chain I'm likely sitting right now, what's likely to happen next, and what door can I close proactively to prevent the next piece of movement. And at that point, you've gone from being reactive to proactive, and anybody who's worked in security long enough tells you that is a huge level up in the maturity of your security operations.
It keeps an event from becoming an incident.
Bingo.
This is the best part of our job, right? It's so if you like cyber, you probably like the whole concept of cyber warfare, there's some psychology in it. If you're one step ahead of the attacker, you know that you have full intel, a full report that says, typically after they establish persistence over in this machine, they're gonna lay low for a couple weeks before they start jumping over, and they typically target PLCs next, right? If you know that, what can you do? You can set up honeypot networks, you can do a lot. Obviously, this is a very serious industry, but there's some fun into it where we get to actually be empowered to be better than the attacker, right? You get to take the steps necessary to really secure your environment, to be smarter instead of always playing catch up.
I think the most important takeaway of an integration like this, for me at least, is taking that intel, because a lot of you might have intel feeds and be able to consume that. Take that intel and operationalize it all the way through to remediation and prevention faster. You don't have weeks. You don't have time to wait for your next scan. You don't have time to wait to make sure every endpoint is coming online. No, you need to be able to get out there and operationalize it faster so you can move on to the next thing and empower your teams to innovate.
We were talking about this earlier, the idea of this driving your threat detection and threat detection engineering group, because you're going to, again, build those sort of personalized detections after you've got those initial hits.
Right.
So I know we were looking at potentially showcasing a demo. I know we're not going to do that today. So what we have on here, the last kind of slide that we have before we switch over to questions, is showing you a little bit more about what the IR lifecycle looks like if you have both of these technologies, right? So within threat response, you have the ability to leverage and search for different intel types. OpenIOC, STIX, Yara rules. Tanium provides you with our own proprietary intel that looks at behavior. So if a process writes to this registry and it also creates a file in this directory, that's something we can alert on. So you're able to, in the background, start scanning for intel, or scanning against intel. This is where Maddie comes in, where we would take in the IOCs that Maddie provides in the reports, and you can generate alerts based on what you're seeing in your environment. The next phase of that is, all right, I have an alert. Now I need to dig deeper. I need to run triage, and I need to figure out how severe this is so I can then kick off any other workflows that I need to. This is where the investigation piece comes in, right? So really looking at the historical data, looking at real-time data. Live response is the ability, like I said, to pull native artifacts from disk. We can even help you pull a full memory image. You can even run your own forensics tool scripts, your own forensic scripts, any tooling that you need, so that you can collect other telemetry, other evidence from those endpoints that's relevant, and send them over for analysis. At that point too, like I said, we're a communications platform. So if it does not exist in Tanium, you can write it. If you write PowerShell, VB script, Bash, Python, you can create your own custom content to say, these are the things that I want to execute. You test it on a single machine, and then you can go ahead and push it out within the platform across all your machines. As you're starting to dig deeper into those systems, that gives you better intel because you're starting to see now how the attacker is acting specifically in your environment. And then that gives you a better, we'll say, point of view for when you're scoping. So yes, I see that this attacker, I found the IOCs in the report, but I see that the attacker has compromised this account and he's compromised these groups. And because he's got this account has local admin via group membership on a subset of machines, and you can start to track that movement and again, stay one step ahead. And this is where that scoping and kind of that proactive piece comes into play, and that full context of Tanium data tells you. There's a really cool use case that I love here. So Tanium actually includes a network discovery capability called Tanium Discover. What we do is we'll tell you what's on your network, and we can look and actually run Nmap scans, so we can tell you ports, MAC address, you name it. Now, I always like to say, okay, well, if we see a MAC address that should be for a VoIP phone or some type of internet-connected printer, right? But I look at the open ports, and those open ports are not lining up with a VoIP phone, like it's got 22 open or is doing something else. I can then pivot into Tanium and say, has this IP address, which now is on my internal network, so it's got an internal IP, has it ever communicated to any of my machines over these ports that are not typical for VoIP or for printing? And then I can start to more proactively hunt and stay one step ahead. And then I can feed that intel into threat response so that I'm more proactively looking and say this IP or this machine is malicious. That being said, also looking at the rich context about compliance scans, like if there are deviations from config compliance baselines or if there are CVEs that are known exploitable on these machines. And then we get to the last part, which is, again, we empower you to respond how you see fit. So if you think you need to lay low and collect more information, you can wait, and you have the visibility to make that okay. You're still neck and neck with the attacker. But at the same time, should you decide that it's time to kill a process or quarantine the machine or create or push out new policies or update applications or patch the system, all of that you can do within that single Tanium console.
I think that final behavior comes out of, not only, understanding what your business risk is associated with, the attacker, where they're at and what they're trying to get access to, but also your confidence in that you've caught them before they're, before they've reached whatever it is that's going to be their trigger point. Because ultimately, in the intelligence reports, you're going to see, where they're stepping next, so you can make those confident decisions. Is it okay for me to sit and watch a little bit longer because I've got them contained?
Exactly.
Or do I have to act now?
Yep.
And I think that gets to not the next slide, but the next slide's a header slide, but the one after that. There we go. When you're dealing with an incident, any of us that have been in those kind of operations, you've had your boss come up and tap you on the shoulder and be like, we good? And it's usually first, you're in the midst of it, and are you confident that you've actually found all that evil in your environment? Are you confident that there is not something out there that maybe hasn't reached a potential detection opportunity, but it's staged and ready to go? And are you confident that you've closed all of the holes that initial attack came in through? And I think that's where the intel integration is some of the most valuable, because you have that full story to be able to take the intel piece, what you saw in your environment, but you also know what you may be likely to see or what you may not have looked for yet. And coupling those two things together is a powerful integration.
Being able to utilize estimative language in that are we good question is kind of important.
Are we good?
I can say with high confidence that we're good, or with moderate confidence that we're good, based upon the stories that we know.
But also being able to build in the ability to alert now that you've consumed this intelligence, and be able to build in the automated policy of, if I see this, kill it. If I see this, enforce the policy. If this comes out of compliance or this port gets opened back up, kill it. So you don't have to just, you're not having to spend your cycles out there continually looking for that same piece of intel. You're building automation around it at that point.
Exactly. Now you've built automation on top of it. Are we good right now? Moderate to high confidence, yes. Are we good if it comes back? Well, we've built the automations that we'll see it. It'll pop. We'll know.
So to kind of wrap us up, when does Madi, Intel, and Tanium make sense for a company? When does it make sense for your business? Really, it comes down to giving you the certainty that you need that when a security incident happens, you will know about it, right? That's where the Intel piece comes in, and that you're empowered to do something about it. Like I said, you need an EDR, you need next-gen AV, you need some type of security solution that's gonna go ahead, see the low-hanging fruit, see those things, block it, and take care of it, because we do not have enough people in cyber to triage everything manually. But inevitably, things are gonna get passed. Supply chain attacks, 0 days, insider threat. And what do you do in those incidents? And who do you call? And how long does it take for you to get back to healthy and get back to confident that we're secure?
The most fun intel hunts are the ones that get past the EDR.
Yeah. That being said, I know we have time for questions, so nobody interrupted, so I'm hoping it's because you guys were like just really waiting for questions. But yeah, floor is yours.
So you were talking about the
I think he
So,
wants to.
yeah, he wants the mic because we're live streaming
You're on
as
a
well,
live stream
so
now.
You're
Hi.
live stream.
That sounds good. So we talked a lot about the Madi integration and how you guys are taking Mandiant Intel and passing it into the platform. A lot of people who use Tanium and use a bunch of other platforms, so Mandiant, all of these other Intel providers are pulling them into something like a tip, and that's usually where they're adding their own enrichment, correlation, stuff like that. How does that fit into this process and to passing that Intel into Tanium after we pull Mandiant and all of our other Intel sources into our tip and
Yeah,
bringing it in?
so you said you work integrations, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So right now, the integration that we're looking at is going to be Madi directly into Tanium.
Yeah.
And so this is for like if you don't have a tip. Now, if you do have a tip, I know that we do already have like APIs and a lot of integrations with different like Intel platforms. So that'd be an opportunity, like it's separate from the integration that's launching, but you can still leverage it that way. So I'd imagine you'd have Madi going into the tip, getting the enrichment there, and then pulling that into Tanium, which is still actionable. This integration skips the tip for folks that don't have an active
Yeah.
tip.
So when it skips the tip and it goes there, is it bringing any extra increased functionality that you're getting directly from Mandiant when you're pulling it in? So like, I guess I know you talked about it a little bit. I just want to make sure like,
Yeah.
if you're pulling it in for a tip, passing it in, but if you're pulling it directly from Mandiant,
Yeah,
the
you're
increase
wondering,
in
is it better to
functionality-
go through the tip or just go
Yeah.
direct? So the way that it'll look today is we're going to pull in those IOCs. We're looking at things with higher confidence, higher M scores. In the integration, it will not include OSINT. So if you all are heavily leveraging OSINT for like from the Madi feeds, that's something that you would probably want to have coming in through the tip. But what will end up happening is you'll get the intel, we'll scan for it, and if there's a match, you'll get the context to drive you back to the Madi console to get the full report and context.
Gotcha.
So there's that link.
So in workflow, you'll be able to drive straight back to Madi.
Gotcha.
Where we get into some of the sort of use cases and concepts around putting the tip in the middle is when to be quite frank, not every organization has the ability or have people that are doing further intelligence analysis, adding their own commentary on something like that. Tips are perfect for that as well. And a lot of organizations don't necessarily have the operational maturity or capabilities to do that, which is why driving it directly into the workflow and the product that they're using is sort of, I consider that we're in, moving towards that walk phase of Intel integration and operationalization. As you get better at things and start to build your own intelligence operation, maybe you've got intelligence analysts and they want to be able to add analytic commentary and perform their own OSINT analysis. That's where the tip then becomes your primary point, because now you've got the Intel analysts layering their, your own autobiographical or your own contextual intelligence on top of everything you're gathering from, all of your sources and driving that in as well. But at the same time, you still want your operators, your feet on the ground, to be able to go in and just pivot out to the context. So using both becomes sort of key as you're driving yourself towards that Intel-guided network and computer defense system.
Okay.
And I'll say I'm in product, so I selfishly would love to just pick your brain and see what you're thinking through. So if you have ideas, let's sync with you after.
Okay, awesome. I think you talked to VJ a lot, one of the members of our team.
Oh, yeah.
Like yesterday, so
yeah,
I'm with
he was
him.
at the booth. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So, cool. Thank you.
Is this integration a reversal of what we've been historically told? I know the reputational services with VirusTotal, Palo Alto Wildfire, traditionally we've been told not to bring in IOCs and run them all the time as impacting the endpoint, not as bringing as much value.
Yeah.
So we've been traditionally told not to bring in our IOCs and automate that because it's going to provide overhead.
Yeah.
And instead, we've been doing more reputational services, allowing Tanium to amalgamate stuff and then
Yeah.
query out for matches. And so if you're bringing now Intel in, are you going to be bringing it at a higher level? Say, hey, a TTPs, the threat intel is going to match it up to a sensor
Yeah.
and run more of a question with intelligence? Or are you just bringing in now IOCs and reversing course?
Yeah, so good question. So for those that kind of want the context, the way that Tanium works is we'll take intel into Tanium, and that intel gets sent to the endpoint. And when that intel gets sent to the endpoint, by default, it used to scan once every 24 hours. The new capabilities and the new engine basically allow it to more passively scan in the background. So traditionally, the advisement has been be really intentional with the intel that you bring. You don't need to be scanning for all of the things because chances are your AV, your EDR is going to already catch it. And so I will say on the Tanium side, there's some work that we're doing to kind of help with intel management. But it's not so much a reversal as much as it is like we are helping kind of point the needle towards what is most urgent, right? And so this is where we're working with Mandiant to look at only those things that really require intervention. So the higher M scores, looking at things that are high confidence, and basically allowing your teams to focus on the things that require somebody, like a body at the keyboard to actually respond. But to that point, in terms of impact to the endpoint, the new engine resolves a lot of that, and we have some stuff on the roadmap to provide feedback into how the intel is performing and to put more controls so that you're not running into issues like that.
Yeah, and in this case, think of the Intel feed. We're not just dumping like 16 million IOCs out there, right? We're as part of the way the integration is working, we're actually acting as sort of a reputational analysis service. So when Stephanie talks about M-score, that is ostensibly our confidence analysis. So when we're focusing only on those high confidence indicators in the first place, that sort of reputational analysis is baked into part of that as well. So.
And one of the things too that we're looking at for the first iteration of the integration is having workflows to automatically prune the intel after a certain period of time, specifically from the MADI feed. So again, you're getting the value that you need because these are novel, they are things that are, we'll say, time sensitive, but you don't want to muck up your endpoints with intel that's stale and it's been around for a year. So that's baked into the integration. Good question. We got 8 minutes left.
Yeah, I thought it was.
All right, if nothing else.
Thank you,
close
guys.
out. No problem. I'll hang around for a few extra minutes if anyone has anything they want to talk to any of us. But thank you all for the time. Safe travels.